Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final Survivor Millennium Park post-season interview. I am so excited to be sitting down to talk to this next player who had a very quiet start to the game on the Blue Hara tribe. He formed a couple of key relationships and alliances with other members of his team. He became a standout in the challenges for his team, and by the end of the day, was in a pretty solid position. But then on day two, he went all out. He was making relationships with the other tribe. He was putting decoy votes on his own allies to cause chaos at camp. He was coming up with plans for other people's hidden immunity idols. All of this totally unknown to the rest of his tribe mates until he made it to the final tribal council, where he revealed it all to the jury, and it was enough to win him the title of sole survivor of Millennium Park. I'm so excited to dive into the game with the one, the only Justin. Justin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you for having me. I am fresh off some dental surgery today, so I'm feeling great and looking even better. So really excited. Oh God, I can't smile though. Don't make me laugh.
This will be a very serious interview.
Yeah, to be a really
Oprah
serious
Winfrey style.
That's right. That's right. So while I may look pretty haggard, it's very appropriate for the game, right? So imagine I'm just off the island. I'm feeling really rough. That's where we're at.
There we go. Ouch. Yeah. Well, you're a trooper for sticking with it. We appreciate you still taking the time despite all of that. But so
I'm very excited. I wouldn't give it up for the world. Thank you for the opportunity and for the option to reschedule, but I'd much rather chat with you than be on more drugs. So
absolutely. Well, Justin, let's dive into this. Let's get right into it. You were one of the players who actually has some experience with live reality games, other Survivor games. I'd love to hear a little bit about what your experience had been in the past, any lessons you took away from those that you maybe brought into Millennium Park that helped your game.
Yeah, sure. So I started my live reality game journey back, I think it was 2018. I applied for the first one, not knowing that these things even existed. I've been a lifelong fan of Survivor since minute one, since 16-year-old Justin was like dying to be on the show. And I didn't know that this was even a world that existed. So I somehow stumbled upon one on Facebook, I think. Applied for it, had an interview that like couldn't have gone better. They were praising me about how amazing I'd be in their game or on their show. And then they didn't cast me, and I was devastated. And I was like, screw you guys, I'm gonna go find another one. So then, but I truly am a believer that everything happens for a reason. And so then I put in my application for Survival Challenge, which happens out in Macomb, Illinois. And it was truly, I mean, I know everyone says these things and it's very cliche, but it truly was a life-changing experience for me. I've met some of my closest friends who I still talk to on a daily basis, and will travel all over the country to go and see and visit. And it was a wonderful experience. I'm now on the production team for them and go back every year to volunteer and watch the game and help out where I can. And it just really sparked my love for live reality games, which I learned is this giant community that I had no idea was even out there. So it allowed me to really connect with a lot of other super fans and nerds like me that love this game. And yeah, it was really lovely. And since I've played a couple others, just become kind of obsessed, if I'm being honest, with all of it. So when, I found out that you were running a game and you had played my online version of the game, right? So
I didn't do as well in yours as you did in mine.
Fair, but I tortured you enough. I was like, all right, I'm going to turn the tables, allow Dylan to torture me a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think throughout my live game experience, it's again kind of cliche and everyone says it, but you really can't go in with much more of a strategy than like, I'm gonna play the game, right? Like everyone says, oh, I'm gonna be social. Well, duh, everyone's gonna be social. Oh, I'm gonna like beast it up in challenges. Well, of course, everyone's gonna try in challenges, or I might like hold back in challenges, right? Like, because I don't want to be a big threat. Like there's a lot of common strategies, but it's hard to really know how you're gonna play the game until you're in the situation with the people that you're with. Because the variables of the people that are around you are so key to how you're going to play the game. That's been my biggest lesson. Is I go in with like, this is what I'm going to try to do, but then you're there with the people with all the different elements at play for that specific game, and you can't really plan for that. So I think going in, right, you're going to do all the things you want to do, right? You're going to be yourself and try to find your number one and like do all those things that every Survivor player should do. But you really, my biggest piece of advice for anybody is go in there and just kind of like be flexible to whatever the situation and the context is that you are put in. That was probably my biggest lesson. You know, I've been kind of silly enough to, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, more later. But I've been silly enough to kind of always pick a number one that in every scenario is going to kick my ass if we get to the end together, right? Like that's been my pattern. So I wouldn't say I've really learned a lesson there, outside of the fact that I've now figured out that that's great, but I've got to find an opportunity for them to get out without me really any blood on my hands, right? And I've been fortunate enough my last couple games to be able to do that. So I still kind of pick that ride or die that I think is going to be a good shield and that I think is going to be social and like help me with some of those connections. But knowing they're going to kick my ass in the end, I've got to massage that to figure out how to kind of get rid of them or let them go without, you know, it really being my fault. But that's diving into way too many things.
I was going to say, I have a bunch of questions about that specifically,
Yeah.
actually. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
So Justin, that's awesome. Let's take it to August of 2021. We arrive at the park, 90 degrees. You get assembled with the rest of the Hara tribe. I'd love to hear if you had any strong impressions from anybody on your team. Did anybody stand out immediately?
Well, and you know this from my interview, Dylan, right? Like my biggest worry going into this was like, is this going to be a bunch of Dylan's friends playing Survivor? And like, I'm going to be screwed because I'm not going to know anyone. There's going to be a lot of other relationships. And even while I was sitting there, we were all kind of like convening. I'd see like people get out of a car like together. And I was like, oh crap, like there's a friend pair and there's a this and that. Luckily, I mean, for me, obviously, like that didn't impact the game too much for me. But my biggest fear was like, who knows each other and how on the outs am I really? Obviously, everyone says this. I'll chime in. The first person that stands out in any group like this is John Tan, just because of his energy, because of his quirkiness, and he is not shy in these scenarios to ask people questions and engage with folks. And immediately I was like, ooh, like that could be an interesting shield for me. Like that could, if he's on my tribe, right? Like that, he could be an interesting player to kind of like have at the forefront, kind of being that social shield. So certainly a very strong impression, super, you know, lovable guy, big character, and every game needs one of those, right? So that was exciting to see that. When I saw Kim and Andrew walk up together, I was like, ooh, that's a pair, but that's a pair of people I really would like to work with, right? Like that's just their energy, their vibe. I didn't know like how they knew each other, but they arrived together. So I assumed there was some relationship there, but I liked both of their energies a lot when they first showed up. Those are probably the biggest impressions that I had of my tribe specifically. I kind of did peg Zach a little early on as like, that's going to probably be my biggest strategic competition.
Oh, really?
Because he just seemed like a gamer from the get-go. I could tell that he had something under the hood of like, he was thinking, I think, a lot more than other folks were, I think, right from the get-go. And Tom was always such a mystery to me. We will talk about this later, I'm sure, but like such a mystery to me. I had no idea like what, and I, you know, at that point I didn't know he had played before. I was like, I have no read on him at all. And I typically like feel like I'm a pretty good reader of people. And I just like couldn't get anything from him. I had no idea what was going on there. So it was really interesting. You know, I went into this game wanting to play, and I think I say this in my little intro, right? Like play a little chaotically, play a little differently. I mean, spoiler alert, I've won a game before. So I didn't go in with the pressure of like wanting to win necessarily. I was like, I just want to play a little differently. Because once you've won, it's kind of like that weight is off your shoulders of like trying to play the perfect game. And I had two friends, I'll give them a shout out, Travis and Hannah. They were like, don't be boring. Go in there and like do some crazy shit, right? They were like, try to get like a 2-1-1 or a 3-2-1 vote for us. Like try to, you know, make ties, draw rocks. They wanted like me to go in and kind of go all guns a-blazing. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go in here and play a little bit differently than I had before. Not as safe, because I think a lot of people they'd make the safest move throughout the game to get them one more round. And I was just like, you know what? I don't have to do that. I've won one of these. If it somehow still gets me to the end, great. But going in, I had this concept of like, I just want to play to have fun. I want to make some moves that I've never been able to make before, because I felt more loose. I felt like I could just kind of have fun with this one. I also, it's local, so I didn't pay hundreds of dollars to fly anywhere, and
Right.
I didn't have as much riding on it. Not that I wasn't going to take it seriously, but
No, of course.
I didn't have it. I don't think the stakes were as high for me
Yeah.
because I'd won before. So it was really interesting. Like, it was part of the reason, and we'll get to this in a second too, I'm sure, that I was like, I really want to like work with Karen and get Karen as far as I can, because in every game, the older women tend to go out earlier, right? And I was like, that's something that I would love to try to achieve, is like pair up like a Malcolm and Denise type idea with an older woman and like see how far we can get together. So let's try some different things. But I was really excited that first day. Although I was still apprehensive about relationships, it seemed like a really fun group of people, and it was going to be a really good time. So that was the most important thing.
Awesome. Justin, I would kind of love to take this almost a little bit out of chronological order and maybe talk more about like the story of the Hara tribe, because you mentioned you've sort of talked about everybody already. I would love to hear a little bit from your perspective, like how did that alliance come to be? Because I know that before the first challenge, and this is in a deleted scene that has never been released, you form an alliance with Kim and Karen at a point where it's only the three of you at camp, but Karen is very quickly voted out after that. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, like how did it go from Justin, Kim, and Karen to Karen's out, Zach and Tom are in? Like, what was that from your perspective?
Yeah. So like I said, I do find like the older folks out first narrative very boring. And I was like, let's try to mix it up. Right. So I knew right away I wanted to try to get Karen in with someone else that I felt was strong with the tribe, and kind of lock that person into keeping Karen around as long as we could. Right. So there was a point where it was just Kim, Karen, and I in the camp. And I was like, this is my opportunity. I know Kim's going to be a good player. If I can get her to lock in an alliance with Karen, maybe like she'll help me keep her around. So I said right in front of the two of them, I was like, I really want to work with the both of you. Like, this would be a great trio. Let's ride with it. Trying to get Kim to like get committed into that, whether she wanted to be or not. And like, because she was going to be the bad guy if she's the one that like turns around and votes Karen out. Right. So, we established that pretty quickly. And, I think this has been discussed in some other podcasts, right? I think, or episodes of this. I think it got to a point where we were just so desperate to win a challenge. And as much as it sucks, right? Like, we wanted to try to have the group that we felt was the strongest challenge-wise going into the next challenge after the Karen vote, right? And to that point, like, Karen hadn't really done anything on any challenges to show us like, yes, she's really good at puzzles, or yes, she's really good physically, or yes, she's really good at logic things, or whatever it might be. We hadn't had any evidence. And that was the hardest thing. Going back a second, I don't know if we're going to go back or not. I'm going to probably bounce around a lot. But when we first got to camp, we all kind of sat around and talked about our strengths and weaknesses. And Karen said right away, like, I'm a math person, I'm a banker, like you've talked about this before, right? And then didn't step up to do the puzzles. So, that could have been an opportunity for her to shine, that first challenge where it was a little bit of a more math or numbers-based puzzle. And, that was hard. And if we go even further back, when we had that conversation, Drew basically gave no real answers, right? She was very vague about what her strengths and weaknesses are, and wasn't, everybody kind of had like I'm really good at this, I'm not so good at this, right? And Drew was much more kind of vague, and certainly didn't say like, here are all my weaknesses, but didn't really say, here are some of my strengths either, which was kind of my impetus to try to get her out earlier. That was the one thing I think I could really push to people, is like, hey, at least Karen said something. Because I do think it was probably between Karen and Drew for that first vote. So I tried to get Karen, Kim, and I to be a thing. I think at some point it was just like, we're going to be screwed if we don't win a challenge at some point. And who knows? Like, it like destroys my heart. Watching Karen say how she was playing for her mom just like wrecked me when I watched the episode, because she was so lovely and so fun. And who knows if we probably could have still won that challenge with Karen. Who knows? But I think as a group, we were trying to figure out what's the best possible scenario to put us into the next challenge to win. Because if we don't win, we're just going to get picked off one by one. So unfortunately, it was the Karen decision. I certainly did fight against it a little bit and tried to see if we could finagle another way, but I kind of knew it was going to put me on the chopping block if I pushed too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew the tribe was right. I knew the tribe was kind of leaning in that direction. It was probably did make the most sense to help us move forward.
So at this point, so Karen gets voted out, and Zach and Tom, do they kind of get brought into the fold by Kim? Like, what was your relationship to Zach and Tom?
Absolutely. I think I have a note somewhere on I have little notes here. I really did not have much of a relationship with Zach and Tom until kind of later in that day one. Kim was absolutely the hub and kind of, I think, bringing the various pairs and groupings together. And I kind of, that was a little bit my strategy, but looking back, I probably should have tried to establish some of those relationships. I'm going to jump way ahead, but it still blows my mind that Zach would come to me about voting out Kim, because Zach and I had really not much of a strategic relationship before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume he'd think how close I am with Kim. That would be a silly move, but we'll talk about that later. I do have to clarify one thing. This is going to be such a messy interview, Dylan, just so we're clear. So sorry for all those watching. See if you can keep up with us, because we're going to go all over the place. But there has been some accusations that I broke some rules during the first tribal council and was talking to people on the way, which I did not. John Ton, I'm looking at you. I did not talk to anybody on the way. I kept with the rules of not talking. Once we sat down at tribal and people were giving answers, I absolutely was whispering. I think Tom was on one side of me, Kim was on the other, about going for Drew. And I mouthed it to Karen from across tribal council, but not until we sat down at tribal council did I make any moves. But I did really feel like I was, sorry, Drew, like I was the reason that's the way the vote went. The fact that Zach voted that way too was great, because I didn't get to communicate with him, and maybe someone else did, but didn't break any rules. I want to be very clear about that. I'm a big rule follower. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. Did you ask me a question? Oh, the Zach and Tom thing. Yeah. So, I think Kim absolutely was the bridge of those relationships. And that's a theme that plays throughout the entire season, because she had many more relationships than I did. And in a lot of ways, those relationships she had kept me safe, which was great. And one of the reasons I picked her, right, as my number one, is I knew she was going to be good at that stuff. I could tell right from the beginning that we would think similarly about the game, and that she could probably make more relationships than I could. It's a pattern I've had in all of my games that I've played, is finding that one person I can see being a social butterfly, and I can see being able to build trust easily with people and get them to tell them information. Mm-hmm. And it allows me to be a little bit behind that person, maybe not as much of a threat. So it can absolutely, I think, help solidify that group. I mean, it also kind of got formed by necessity, right? Like once it got down to the five of us, it was like, we can't lose anymore. Like, so we kind of gelled really quickly as a group, because we're like, we have to come together and work as a unit, or we're going to be a Tortuga 4 or 5 minority, right? Like, we're going to be in a bad situation, right? Like, so we I think it came together a lot because of Kim and her being at the center, but also like we had to rely on each other. We had to, I think, connect in ways we hadn't earlier in the game if we had any hope for surviving.
Got it. So in episode 2, there's a scene where Tom disappears looking for the idol. He ends up finding it, and you're all together sort of speculating, like, what was your reaction to that? Like, and I believe it gets mentioned later that you're skeptical about Tom's idol.
Yeah. So, I mean, this just goes under the file of Tom being mysterious, right? Like, I think we at some point gave him the benefit of doubt of like, maybe he's doing a confessional, but then it felt like too long and no one really knew what was going on. And I actually, I think I don't think I ever saw Tom's idol ever in the game. Me personally, I think other people did, but I never saw it. And I was the last to know about it. Funny story, evidently I was basically all over the clue that was in the bag, but never saw the clue, because I was in the bag and reaching things and pulled out a note, and Zach was mad. I read the note to everyone and like all these things, but I never saw the other note. I wasn't sure, and this is, clever you, and I know other people have mentioned it too. After that first tribal, when you don't ask for idols, I'm like, oh, must not be in the game, right? So when everyone was talking about how like Tom had an idol, I was just like, are we sure? Like, have you seen it? Mm-hmm. And like, does it look like something that he could have made, or does it look like something Dylan would have made, or the production team would have made, right? I think I don't know. I think in a lot of live games, the idols that are found tend to look like something. Here, I'll give you an example. Ready? I don't think anyone's ever done this in their podcast, so I'm gonna take you on a little journey. But so like when I was in Reelfoot, I found this idol, right? So this is very obviously something that probably no one made,
Yeah.
or anything like that, right? It's very obvious that it is an idol that is intended to be in the game. So I was just like, is this like a stick, like a fucking stick that he just found and is saying is an idol, or do we think it's actually an idol? So I was kind of confused about it all. But even just the idea that he had an idol, I was trying to think of how I could use that to my advantage. Is it something that if we end up in a minority situation, I try to leak to the Tortuga side so that he's a bigger target than me? Kind of having info that someone maybe has an idol, you can use it to your advantage in some ways. But anyway, so I was pretty skeptical about the idol at the beginning, but kind of over time grew more and more confident about it and knew it was something that I at least had to assume was there and would have to be dealt with at some point. Because even just like if Tom was being like, oh yeah, I have an idol for some reason, right? You've got to play with that as a dynamic in the game.
Right. Justin, is there anything else you wanted to touch on from the first 3 episodes? My next question is about episode 4 with the beanbag challenge. Anything else from Drew Boot, Karen Boot, your team's first win?
All right, ready? I can't believe you showed a shot of me when you said only one will survive. That was a lot of foreshadowing. The number puzzle, I've seen that before. I know that puzzle very well. I probably should have done it. And I kind of regret not doing it. But it's okay. Like I'd never want to put myself in a hero spot right away. So I was kind of like, that's probably better that I don't do that. I thought the moment around the 6, was it a 6 or was it a 9?
Yep.
Really sorry that's maybe the one time I kind of broke the rules a little bit. And I think that's it from episode 1, episode 2. Oh, I was so mad. Let's just talk really quickly about the bottle on the paddle challenge.
Oh,
yep. I sat there and I was like, team, this is the strategy. You throw the bottle in the air, you knock the other person's down. That's the strategy. I went up first. I showed everyone how to do it. I won the point. And then no one else did it. I just want to mention that because that should have been ours to win. Even Tom's point was more like his bottle just fell, right? Like
Andrew just stepped wrong in his bottle.
So I will claim that I was the only person to get a legitimate point in that round, and I was really frustrated that people weren't listening, and I was trying not to be a jerk about it, but that was frustrating. And then the only thing I would just mention in my first live game experience, survival challenge, my tribe also lost the first 2 immunity challenges, and I was just like, it's a repeat of history. But I've been in that scenario before, right? So it was interesting to be in that scenario again. On the counter to that, in Reelfoot, my tribe won the first 2 immunity challenges. So I've been kind of on both sides of that. I mentioned that because there is a little bit of an advantage to losing at least one of those first 2. Because you establish some connections, right? You establish some alliances of who's going to go, and you start to see where people's loyalty lies. So I do think there is a benefit there. And I think some other of the Tortuga folks have mentioned that, they didn't really know where the relationships were until that first vote, halfway through day 1 or whatever that was for them. So that was just an interesting dynamic. And then episode 3, I was a little surprised that John went out first, because John just seemed so sweet and simple. I'm like, why would you get out John first, right? Not simple in a bad way. Sorry, John.
No, yeah.
I mean, from our perspective, or from my perspective at least, I didn't see him as a big schemer and gamer. Actually, watching some of these episodes was interesting because I think a couple of you mentioned he did go on an idol hunt, and he was probably more strategic than we actually saw. So probably the right reasons there. But
all right, Justin, I do have a fan question about episode 4. My mom wrote in, my actual mother wrote in, and she wants to know from you, how long have you been honing your beanbag throwing skills?
So it's really interesting. When we did that first initial discussion around strengths and weaknesses, the one thing I can usually claim as a strength is accuracy and finesse type challenges, right? So I am a cornhole player. I've been playing for a long time. I love cornhole. I've run a league. Like, it is probably my most favorite thing. And I will admit, like, I'm not the best cornhole. Like, I don't do the weird pizza toss thing a lot of people do. You know, I have my own way to do it, and you know, it works. I think in a somewhat casual setting, I do pretty well. If I like go to a pro tournament, I'm gonna get crushed, right? So it's not like huge, but it's there. I'm also a softball pitcher, and so like I have accuracy has always been one of those things I've been fairly good at. So when we talked about that, and then there was a beanbag tossing challenge, I was like, this could go one of two ways. I either live up to the expectations and I'm the hero, or I miserably fail and, you know, I'm just a big liar and embarrass myself with all 232 or whatever subscribers you have on the YouTube channel. So, you know, going into that challenge, I think you even see it with the tree mail reading, right? Everyone's like, this is your challenge. You're an accuracy guy, right? And so, you know, I think I've been playing cornhole for a very long time. I've been running my league for about 6 years at this point. You know, and I feel fairly competitive in a novice type setting. So I think what was interesting about that is we decided, like, should I go first or should I go last, right? Do I set the tone, or do I like kind of be the anchor in case something goes wrong, which it does. So, you know, I think I'm glad we chose to put me where we did, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I had the right energy going in there, being like, I only need to score one. Versus if I went up there first, I may have tried to do a crazy thing to get more points or something.
Right.
Which I don't believe was even physically possible, like physics wise, to get a bag to stay on one of those.
It was not the most well set up of the challenges. I'll take the blame for that. It was very precarious.
All good. But yeah, I mean, it obviously felt like a great moment. I may watch that slow-mo every week until I die. Like, I just love that moment. Brilliant editing. And I mean, it does actually feel good to like see my teammates in the background, like holding their breath and really rooting for me. Cause it's, you know, I'm not a giant athlete. Like, I don't, you know, I play softball and these kinds of things, but like, I don't consider myself a clutch person. Right. You know, if I'm up to bat in a softball game and we're down by 1 run and I got to hit one in, I'll usually sub someone in for me. Like, I'm not the go-to guy for like clutch moments, I would say. So it felt good to actually deliver for the team. And I don't remember if I said this in my final tribal or not, but that was the challenge that put us then in the majority, right? So if I don't win that challenge for us, it could have been the exact opposite, where we lose somebody, Tortuga goes on to, you know, win more, and we're no longer in the majority. So, you know, I should have claimed more credit for giving us that majority advantage. But felt good. I loved it. Yeah, it was a great moment. And I had to do something to steal some camera time from all the tree punching and everything else that was going on. You know, I had to have some big moment, because episode 4 was all about the tree punching. So
famously the tree punching episode. That's right. That's right.
But yeah, so great moment for me. Loved it. That's probably when I got the most outreach from friends, being like, of course you made it. Like, of course you were the guy. So
I love that. Justin, I really don't mean to yada the pre-merge, but there's just so much to dive into when we get later. So is there anything else from episode 4 with the beanbag episode? Anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, but before, I don't think 4, but episode 5.
Yeah, but episode 5.
There's a little pre-merge stuff that happens in there, I think.
Yes.
You know, I think that's where this is the first time I really, I think, say to a confessional, like, I want to run this game with Kim, right? Like, that's when I really kind of made that definitive, this is my ride or die no matter what type of moment. Which I only mention that because it took everything inside me not like to panic when the 3 of them went off to do the puzzle challenge and I was left with John Ton. I was like, this is worst case scenario for me. I'm not with Kim and I'm with John Ton. And I love John Ton. And actually, as I was sitting there, I was like, if this is a swap, right? There were so many different possibilities. Like, does the tribe that wins, did those 3 swap to the other side? Like, there were so many scenarios that I was running in my head of like, if we're in a minority here, it's 3-2. I was like, maybe John Ton's a little bit of a bigger target, but I wasn't sure what connections Jonathan had, because there was all these talks about he kind of knew maybe Emma or he kind of knew Jean. I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. But I was like, I think in some scenarios it could be good for me. He'll be a bigger target, but if he has any connections with the three that come over, I could be dead in the water. I was like, if there's anything where it's like me versus Jonathan and something, I was like, I mean, if it's a tree punching contest, I'm done for. You know, if there's other things, like maybe I'd be okay to beat him in some things. I don't know. So I was sitting back at camp just running all the different scenarios. Like we barely talked, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what did you guys do?
Not much. I think we just sat there, very little chit chat. Yeah, we did not do much. I actually have a note, like, I don't feel like Jonathan and I really talked very much. Like we didn't talk strategy. I know like Andrew and Tony used it to talk strategy and like do all these things. Like we did none of that. So, and I think it was because, like, again, we didn't really have that close of a strategic relationship before then. So there just wasn't a ton of strategy talk that went on in that moment. So, you know, and kind of looking at it as a viewer and watching some of the episodes, I was like, it's probably a big flaw in my game to have Kim, Zach, and Tom go off and form a close bond over that puzzle. Because later you see there's like a Kim, Zach, Tom final three that gets established. And so, you know, it's again, it worked out fine, but like, that's just something I look back and I'm like, oh, that was like, I never want to put myself in a minority situation, right? That's another piece of advice for all you future players. Like, if there's any scenarios in where there's a bigger group and a smaller group, and I think this is our Tortuga lesson too, right? That's how their alliance was formed, was because some went to the bathroom and some stayed.
Right.
You never want to be in the smaller group, right? So, you know, you don't always have control. I feel like if I was a jerk and was like, no, guys, I'm going to do the puzzle, like it could have also rubbed people the wrong way. So, you know, it was what it was. But it was a really interesting point in the game for me because I was running so many scenarios, and then like the least of all evils actually happened. We won the challenge. There was no swap. Everything was great. So
it was a stressful couple of minutes wondering.
It was. And what's funny is Jonathan and we saw the girls walk by. Like we were standing up on the hill, like trying to see down on the path, like who was walking. We saw the girls running. So I do remember one of the things we said was like, well, if we hear any male cheering, that means we win, right? That means that we won the challenge. So as soon as we heard male cheering, we were like, that's when you see us hug. Like we knew right away that we had won. Which was really exciting.
You two hugging.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Justin, I think that brings us about to the end of day one. I'd love to hear how you're sort of feeling as you reach the end of the day. You know, like how are you feeling about the rest of your team, and like sort of like what plans are you forming at the end of that first day?
Yeah, it's interesting. By the end of the day, I know I have a really good relationship with Kim, and we have talked, I think I had mentioned this at some point, we have talked about going to the end together, talked about being ride or die as number one, final two, whatever we want to say, right? I feel like I have very loose relationships with the other three, right? And part of me was like, again, this is me being a little chaotic. Like, I don't want to just take a final five of all horrors to the end. Like, that seems very boring to me, right? Like, again, I have my friends in my head being like, don't be boring, don't take the safe route. And I have like my own spirit of just like, hey, I want to mix this up. I want to make it more entertaining. I want to make it more fun. And so I think in some ways, maybe this is just me now looking back and creating my own narrative about why I did this, but you know, I think I kept some of those relationships loose so that there was more flexibility at the merge. And in my brain, and I apologize, Andrew, if this actually never happened, but in my brain, I'm like, I want to get with Andrew in the morning. I want to chat with him and be like, hey, I don't want just like all the straight white guys to get to the end, right? Like, let's like mix it up a little bit, right? So, you know, I really did have this intention of wanting to work with Andrew, to continue to want to work with Kim and you know, try to grab a couple people and just mix it up and make it a little bit more exciting. But the team mentality was like final five to the end. Let's, you know, we have an easy ride. If tomorrow's morning is the merge, let's do that. And so, you know, but I knew in that group of five, I felt like I was probably fourth or fifth, right? Like I knew that probably Zach, Jonathan, and Tom had a tighter bond to the three of them than I had with any one of them.
Sure.
So I was kind of like, if those three have a final three, that puts me and Kim on the outs. They're going to easily identify Kim as a big threat if they, you know, so then I'm kind of either fourth or fifth in that scenario, I think, which we see play out later in the game. So, you know, and there's not, I just want to be clear, there's nothing wrong with straight white men. They're lovely. I love them all. They're beautiful people.
On behalf of the straight white men, we forgive you, Justin.
Thank you. So, but at the end of the day, like, right, I had a great time, right? I made it further than I expected. And I felt good that like, it wasn't just a bunch of Dylan's friends playing Survivor, right? Like the day validated that like, hey, there's more to this game than just a bunch of Dylan's crazy friends playing in a park for a day. So that was great. You know, I felt good about what I've done so far. I think I hadn't made any promises outside of Kim, so it allowed me flexibility to figure out what I wanted to do the next day. And, you know, I think had what the craziness that we're about to talk to, had that not happened, I certainly think I would have tried to mix the game up in some other way, which we'll talk about that. But
that's right.
Yeah, but it was a really fun first day. It was obviously like super hot and gross and all those things. But I think I didn't really mention this before. Again, sorry viewers, jumping all around. But I think what's really great about this game specifically is it doesn't rely, you're not as worried about the elements and the camping side of the game, right? It's all strategy and challenges, which is great. It's a little bit of a different game. You're not voting people out or keeping people based on like how much they're contributing to camp life or any of that stuff, right? So it's just a different game. You know, I played an 8-day game where like you actually do care if people are doing stuff around camp and getting wood and keeping the fire going. Like that actually does factor in. I mean, it's 8 days, it's not life changing, so of course,
but sure,
but it's bigger than here, right?
Yeah.
And this is all strategy, all challenges, you know, and so I think it's just a little bit of a different game than I played. So, you know, that was really fun. Going home that day, I was like, you know what, like it was really fun to not have to think about any of the other bullshit of like actual survival, but just like having a fun day playing the strategy piece that I really liked. So yeah, day one in the books.
That's awesome. That's good. I'm gonna put that in the commercial for if we do a season 2. all strategy, all fun.
No survival bullshit.
No survival bullshit. Anything else from day one? Any thoughts on members of the other team before you actually get to meet them?
No, I was super disappointed to not get to play with Wu. She seemed like such a cool character in person, and yeah, just like a little bit of a badass. So I was disappointed to A, she wasn't on my tribe to begin with, and B, she got out before I was able. Tony, obviously, everyone, as we've discussed, right, thought of him as a big threat. And then we were a little bit like, well, maybe he's not a big threat. He really hasn't been doing much. What is he doing? Is he just this like aloof college kid? Who knows? So, and you know, as everyone has always said, like Gene and Emma absolutely felt like a pair to me, very similar kind of look, feel, vibe, all of that. So, you know, go kind of wrapping that day knowing that those were the 4 personalities that I had to work with. I think Tony talks about this in the interview he just did. You know, we're walking back up the hill to go to our cars, and Gene and Emma are like miles ahead of us. And I don't know that Tony was truthful that we were like sitting there talking about the boot list right in front of him. I don't know if it was that obvious. Maybe it was. We might have been that cocky. Who knows? But you know, it was very telling that Gene and Emma were so far away, and Andrew and Tony knew at least enough strategically to like hang back, at least listen and observe. You know, I think that for them, that was the right move. And this is something I always advise friends that are playing games. It's like, if you are walking anywhere, stay towards the back of the crowd, because you can talk more secretively and you can see who's talking to each other in front of you. So you see where those relationships are happening, and you can see kind of just, it's kind of that old telltale of Survivor, of like really seeing who sleeps together at night.
Yeah.
Well, platonically, but who sleeps next to each other in the tent at night, right? Like, that those types of things really show you the relationships that are actually in the game. So, you know, I think I knew it was going to be an interesting situation, because I think there's a lot of discussion around Andrew and Kim and how much that relationship was going to play post-merge. Like, could we pull Kim over? Sorry, could we pull Andrew over? Could they pull Kim over? You know, Kim and Andrew seemed to kind of be in that really interesting swing position. And I had the misfortune, I don't know yet, we'll talk about it, of like taking Kim and Andrew home at the
Oh
end of the
yeah.
day. What a bad idea. So but there was definitely like concern and opportunity there, I think, on both sides of Tortuga and Hara, in terms of kind of what the possibilities could be there with Kim and Andrew.
Justin, can you tell me a little bit more about that car ride with Kim and Andrew? Because I think both of them touched on it in their interviews, that they got a little bit of information about you from being in your car.
Yeah, so silly me. When I play games, I'm very proud, right? Like I love these things, and I love all the different kind of mementos and things. In fact, I'm gonna do another tour. I typically would be wearing my Hara buff, but I actually framed the two of
Love
them
that. I
and
love
have them
that.
up on my wall with my other games. But I like keep a bunch of things, right? So like here's a bunch of stuff from other games that I've played, and like I get really excited about this stuff, and I I'm very proud. So regardless of how I do in the game. So I had one of my buffs from Surviving Reelfoot hanging on my mirror, and I think it was Andrew was like, hey, what's that from? And I stupidly was very honest and was like, oh, that's another game that I played this past summer in Tennessee. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I wanted to suck it back in and be like, why did you just say that? That was the dumbest thing you could have said. Especially since I did very well in that game. And of course, they were going to ask how I did in that game. So I just kind of left it. I did very well, and just kind of like, left it at that. But I mean, you see it in the episode right away where Andrew tells the Tortuga group, like, he's a big game player. He does all these things. He played an 8-day game in the woods. Like, he's a serious, right? Like he puts that target on my back as soon as possible. So, what I was hoping would be like, oh, a kind of, while we're not talking strategy, like a bonding moment with Kim and Andrew, and maybe we like form a trifecta. It actually like backfired on me completely. And it could have potentially tanked my game in a way. Like if Kim had took that information differently and was like, fuck, like I can't, sorry, I shouldn't swear. Darn, I shouldn't go far with Justin. Like he plays these games all the time and decided to flip to Tortuga or whatever, right? There could have been bigger implications for that than there actually were. So luckily, it didn't impact the game as much as it could have. But I was trying to take it as an opportunity to kind of like just connect more socially with both Kim and Andrew. And they got a little bit more information that during that trip than maybe I would have liked.
Right.
Yeah.
So that does take us to the merge. So let's talk about this crazy merge round. Did you see Tony as somebody who you could bring into the fold? Because I know that he has that moment that's, really stirs things up when the tribes like separate at the merge camp, and he's like, Justin, can I let's still talk? What was your opinion of Tony at that point?
That was such an interesting moment. And I actually remember that so crisp and clearly, because I was like, this kid is ready to play. Like he knows he's on the bottom, and he's, he needs to find a way out. And somehow he's targeted me as the person to kind of get him out of it. And hearing from Tony, right, like they had a little bit of a strategy of like trying to pull people away. And I think there was more to it than just like trying to self-preserve. But I was really interested in that. And I'll say this 1,000 times probably during this interview. I had a genuine interest in working with Tony. Probably there were peaks and valleys of that relationship, right? We'll get to the stab later. But like I actually, we had a talk where we're like, we should be a duo, right? Like you see Zach and John Ton very clearly a duo. You see, and I think Tony was thinking, and I, had my concerns too, that like Tom and Kim might be really, really close, right? Because she knew about the Idol Way before I did. Maybe that, at least Tom considers her his duo. And then you got Gene and Emma, right? And so there's all these, or Kim and Andrew, right? Like you've got all these pairings, and the two of us naturally kind of don't have any of those pairings. I had Kim, but Kim had so many other options,
right?
That like Tony was a good option for me. And so I did want to do what I could, and luckily naturally it kind of flowed that way, to keep Tony in the game. Again, another good shield for me. I knew he'd probably be a target for my allies before they'd ever come after me. And like, he seemed like a sharp kid. And I really liked his energy. I liked kind of those first initial chats that we had. I think had Tony and I been on the same tribe, I don't know if he would feel this way, but I think he would have been the person in that tribe I would have gravitated to the most strategically. As much as kind of Wu and Andrew stood out kind of in that very first early day one meeting, I think as the game progressed, he would have been my Kim on that side had I been over there. So, you know, I think it was a really interesting kind of first vote. You know, I was sorely disappointed in my performance in the Bolo challenge because
I was
again,
gonna say, for being the
accuracy
guy.
and all that should be my forte, and I couldn't. I don't know if I've ever played ladder golf outside of that ever in my life, but and I don't think it's a lawn game I'll ever be purchasing after that performance. So so, you know, very disappointed in my performance there, but it's not the worst thing not to win that first immunity. It's a little bit less of a target, right? So yeah, so we have that. Obviously Andrew wins. I don't think I would have wanted Andrew to go that first round anyway. Again, just keeping options open. And you know, then you see the chaos of like what our plan is, what we're telling them our plan is. I wish it was as perfectly thought out as it appears in the episode, because the fact that the two ladies vote for Tony and the two men vote for Emma, and then we all vote for Jean, it's so beautiful. It's so perfect. Like, I wish we were that organized and that was our actual plan. And I think some of that was our plan, but we didn't really know how those four were going to vote. Were they going to stick together? Were they not? And it just looked so stunning that we got them to vote for each other and then voted for someone completely different. Like, it was beautiful.
Right.
I wish I could claim that at the end, but I can't, because it was madness. It was not as organized and as clean as it seemed. And I think, you know, I think a couple of people have talked about kind of why Jean for that one. And I think for me, it was like, who's the least likely person to have an idol or to get an idol played on them? And so that's why the names that were getting thrown around was basically anybody but Jean, because we wanted that idol to go somewhere else. And so, you know, and I think also for me, and Jean even says this, like, we never one-on-ones at all. So like, she was the person I had the least connection with. Probably the person I'd actually most want to get to know outside the game, not just because I didn't get to know her in the game, but she just seemed very cool. But like, we just didn't have any connection. So I was like, she's kind of the most, sorry, Jean, love you, but like the most expendable to me, because I had a little bit of a relationship with Tony. Emma seemed like a little bit more strategic and a little bit more kind of like available to work with down the line if things got crazy, and they
Which, and it turns out,
and they did get crazy. And so, you know, I think Jean makes sense there. And it was also a way, I remember this very clearly, that John Ton was pushing Jean and the group kind of was leaning more towards Emma. And when we finally decided to go Jean, it was like, great, this is a good way for us to make sure John Ton feels secure, feels heard, feels like a part of the strategy in the group, because he was, to me, the biggest wild card. And I wanted to make sure he felt safe in that 5 and felt like he was actually a part of the strategy that was happening, even though kind of Kim and I seemed to kind of be, I think, running a lot of it. I wanted him to feel comfortable, and he really wanted Jean. And so I was like, great, like, Jean works for me. Jean will make John Ton happy. Jean likely doesn't have an idol, because I don't even know if she knows what idols are. And you know, so it actually worked out perfectly. I wish it was as clean and as easy as the episode kind of made it look, or even as it maybe felt in the game. But it was wild. It was really, really wild. And I loved Emma's face when the vote actually happened. Like, her vote reveal face is epic. And I also love that Tom voted Jean, Gene, which I don't know if he did this on purpose, but in season 6 of the Amazon, Heidi votes for Jean in the game and actually spells it the same way. So Tom, shout out to you if that was a Survivor throwback. I don't know if it was or not. But
I would guess, based on how he didn't know who Rupert Boneham was, I'm guessing it wasn't intentional.
Maybe not. But yeah, so Heidi votes Gene Hebert out, writing Gene.
That's
Tom
right.
did the same thing.
That's right.
Epic. Yeah, so that's the end of
That
episode
honestly
15.
covered all of my questions about the
Great.
merge vote. Was there anything else from that round you wanted to touch on at all?
No, the next round is where I have all my notes.
I was
So,
going to say, so this next round, I would love to hear at the final 8 before we even get to the challenge. So you guys get back, you just pulled off like this 5-2-2 vote. You're not aware at this point that Zach is plotting. You don't know any of that yet. What are you seeing as your path forward at that point? You mentioned earlier you're not thinking horror 5 to the end. What are you thinking?
I don't really know what I was thinking. I knew I wanted options. I knew I have this as a note. I was also not aware of the Kim, Zach, Tom trio. Like I did not know that was the final 3. I don't remember Kim telling me that was happening. I'm sure she probably did, but I don't remember being like, that's a solid 3 and I'm screwed. Like I'm 4th or 5th with now John Tom instead of Kim. And so, and it was interesting because John and Tom especially seemed so loyal and logical, and like, why would we break from the 5? Let's just do the 5. Why would we do anything else? So, you know, I didn't really know what my options are, outside of the fact that like I knew there were options out there, but I wasn't really sure what the best option would be for me moving forward. I'm just trying to see if there's anything here. I mean, everybody, I think I have a note there that I felt confident. I felt good. Everybody was making me feel good. And I didn't really know about these other trios that were, I think there was also like a John, Tom, Zach, and Tom final 3 as well. So I was in no one's final 3s, right? So I had a deal with Kim, obviously, but I had no real 3 cluster. And watching the episodes, I was like, wow, I was more on the outs than I expected. I don't know how many of those final 3s were real and like what people actually wanted, but I was not, to me at least, I was not really in a driver's seat at that point.
Right. So Zach does approach you with a plot to blindside Kim, not knowing that she's your closest ally at this point. What's your reaction to Zach coming to you with this?
Yeah, it was mind-blowing to me. And I actually feel like, I can't remember in the episode if it's shown this way, but Zach comes to me pretty early with that thought. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to think about it. And I stew on it for a while. I do not go to Kim right away, which I don't know how clear that is, right? I say, I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna listen. And I did, I think for a brief moment, I thought about what is my path forward if Kim is not here. And again, I really felt like John, Tom, and Zach were much closer to the 3 of them than they were with me. So does that put me in a more vulnerable spot if I'm, again, with all men, right? Or does Kim go and then I somehow find a way to like finagle myself with the Tortuga group? But I knew kind of right away that I just didn't feel good about it. And I was trying to figure out what's the right opportunity to kind of change things. Again, play a little chaotically, find a way to kind of mix things up. But I wasn't really quite sure how to do it yet. I do have to say, I don't know if we're at the challenge point yet, but I'm so embarrassed that I did not know Millennium Park was the year 2000. I just need to say it because it's so, like, watching the episode back, I'm like, you're such an idiot. I think I say this all the time, right? When I help out with production for some of these games, I'm like, guys, we have to remember when people are players in these games, they are idiots. They lose all sense of reality and intelligence. Like your mind is so in so many places, and it's just, you're tapped. I mean, even in a game like this, like it was hot, we were tired.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things, right? Even this was kind of, I think earlier on day 2, we're still kind of like worn out and you're just not thinking clearly. And so, yeah, that was very embarrassing. I think the other thing that I kind of noticed from the challenge bit is that Emma goes for Tony pretty early, which I thought was interesting for her, right? Because she's trying to show that like she's not a part of any Tortuga loyalty, which I thought was really good on her part and interesting. I also thought it was interesting that I cut Tony and he never cut my string, which I was like, interesting, Tony. So, and I was worried. I think at some point Kim goes for John Tom above everybody else, and I was like, "Oh, is that going to make him feel like he's on the bottom? Is he on the outs?" But anyway, so the challenge was interesting. Like I think those kind of challenges do tell you things, even if it's not as blatant. There's some things, little things that you can pick up from that. And then, you know, I think Zach winning, and kind of the way it boiled down, right? Again, it was like Zach and Tom were the last two. And, I talked a little trash and was trying to like mix it up a little bit and being like, you should go for each other. Why would you go for me? Like, don't do that.
That's right. That's right.
But like, that was very telling to me. I'm like, they might be closer than I think, right? And maybe it's like way too much to take from that one little challenge, but it was interesting. And I think also, I don't know if Zach still makes that move if he doesn't have immunity and feel that a little bit more power, right? Like he's got a little bit more control, a little bit more safety. So I'm not sure, like if Tom wins that challenge, does Zach still try to make that move there? I don't know if he does, which is really interesting to think about.
I think there's a butterfly effect where Zach doesn't win that challenge. The five of you, like you vote out Andrew, like, and then like, who knows, maybe the horror five are at the end, and then Zach, Tom, and John are final three, and Zach wins. Zach, maybe you should have won that challenge. Sometimes it pays to lose.
It's so bizarre to think, and that's what these games are all about. Like when you make moves, what's the right time to make the move, and any little thing. That's why like luck is a factor. I know a lot of people don't think that like Survivor you need luck, but like you do need a little bit of luck. Like you need certain things to swing certain ways throughout the game, and any one thing changing can completely change the whole course of the game, which is why I love it, right? Like, and it's why it's so maddening, because you look back and you think like, what could I have done differently?
Right.
What are the mistakes that I made? What are the opportunities I didn't take? And so so we have the post game madness, or the post challenge madness, right? We're all kind of, and I loved watching some of the footage of the other conversations that I knew nothing about. And the John, Tom, and Tom talk, which kind of, I think you start to see Tom's wheels spinning of like, what's really going on here? Like what are people's actual intentions? Kind of blurbing about Kim, blabbing. And, Zach is trying to convince me that Kim wants me out fourth.
I wanted to ask about that, because that's a deleted scene. I do have the footage, and I'm hoping to get a full deleted scene up at some point of that. But yeah, talk to me about that, because I know that you go to Kim to talk about that Zach has made this claim. So I'd love to hear from your perspective.
I don't really remember that moment.
Oh, okay.
I would love to see that scene, because I'm sure I did it, right? I'm sure I was pretty direct with Kim about it. I don't really remember it too much. So at some point we'll have to watch that, Dylan. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it was mad chaos at that moment. And it was like, I didn't know how much of that was true. And, at that time I had to make the decision, like, if there's any bit of truth to that, do I just vote for Kim and like take my chances and try to make some other relationships? If there's no truth to that, do I try to blow up this plan and not let Kim go, because she's still somebody that I need as an ally? And so I don't remember too much about that scenario. Would love to watch that clip, because it sounds like an epic moment that didn't make the actual episode.
I know. It's one of the ones I really tried to. Kim and Emma are like talking, and you like walk up and you look at Emma. You're like, "I'm so sorry." You turn to Kim. Do you want me out in fourth? And Kim's like, "I'll have to find it. It's very funny."
Sounds hilarious.
Justin, tell me about. So, was it you who told Kim what was going on? Because I will say, like, the episode, and like this was honestly my impression of what happened, was that Tom told Kim that there was a plan against her. Was it actually, I think she said it was you that told her.
Yes. So this is my perspective, right? And there's a couple of times where I feel like my story and Tom's story are a little bit conflicting. We'll clear them all up from my perspective, at least. So there is a moment in which I think it's Zach and I, or Zach, John, Tom, and I, and we're farther down the path where everyone's kind of off to tribal council. And this is the moment where Zach's like, we've got the numbers, we're gonna do it, like, we gotta vote for Kim. And Zach trips and falls, and like the minute that happens, I just keep walking, which I'm so sorry, Zach, I should have checked on you. But I just start running down the path, and I'm like, this is the moment where I have to tell Kim. I've got to like see if we can make something happen, because I don't feel like I really thought it was going to happen until right then and there. He was like, these are all the numbers I have. This is what, and I thought it was like going to happen. So I run down the path and I go to Kim and I'm like, it's you. Zach's trying to make a move against you right now. It's you. And I was like, you've got to work your magic. And it's right outside in that holding area before we go into tribal council. It's just Kim, like a pinball, boop, 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 to all the Tortuga people, and being like, this is how you got to vote if you want to stay in the game. Like, she was a boss, right? And like, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to work with her, because she has that ability to just like kind of own the moment and be like, look, if you want to survive in this game, you got to do it. And I personally do feel like I may not have been the first person to tell her that was happening, but I was certainly the last person to be like, this is absolutely happening at this vote, and if we don't do something right now, it's going to be you.
Right.
So I might have been like that final nudge for her to like make something happen. Because I truly think if I don't say that, I think we vote for Andrew there, right? Or so I think that's what the plan was, right? So I think either Kim goes or Andrew goes, and there's like mad chaos after that. Because I don't know exactly where the numbers would have fell. I don't know what the Tortuga folks were going to vote for. I don't think they even really knew until Kim kind of came in and dictated it. I think the worst case scenario is that John Ton and Zach vote one way. The three of us, Tom, Kim, and I, vote Andrew, and then the four of them stick together and vote one of us off, right? And they kind of shift the power there. So luckily, again, I think there's a little bit of luck here. Like, Kim finds a way to get those people to vote with us for John Ton. And really, I mean, I think he knows it's the only reason John Ton goes there is because Zach has immunity, right? And John Ton was his closest ally. And, it's, if you can't get the king, you take their pawn out of the way, right? Or whatever whatever the saying is, right? So, so, but it was chaos. Like, I wish there were cameras right there, because it was so wild. And it is truly like the turning point in the game, because we could have easily sailed the five of us to the end and kept it pretty safe, and who knows what would have happened. I think I would have, if Andrew goes there, I think next round is when I would have wanted to try to flip it. Who knows what I would have done in the actual situation, but knowing that Zach was after Kim, and that potentially meant he was also after me. We have Emma and Tony as votes. Does Tom, Kim, and I plus Emma and Tony form a new group of five? I think that was kind of in the back of my head, and even potentially still an option after, obviously, John Tom goes and we go after Zach, right? So, but yeah, I'm really glad it kind of happened the way it did, because I didn't want it to be boring. And as I look back and think, like, I don't want to play a boring game. I do want to play a little bit more loosely, a little bit more wily. Like, that's one of the moments. I think safe player Justin would have just voted for Kim with Zach, and like,
I mean, you did.
Well, sort of.
We haven't even gotten to that yet.
Yeah. I do think the safe player, though, may go with the alliance. Vote. You
might just let it happen.
Let it happen. Vote with that alliance. Take the safe bet to get to the next round, and try to figure it out from there. I think what Zach said to me made it feel like it was definitive. Kim was going no matter what. So I think a lot of people would have just, again, been in self-preservation mode, voted with the majority to stay in the majority, and then figure it out from there. So, so I'm really glad it kind of happened in that moment, because it shook the game up. I think it kind of revitalized all of our sense of like playing Survivor versus like kind of just playing a majority game.
Right.
Which was just really cool. So we sit down at Tribal, and Tony's sitting next to me, and there's a very clear moment here that if I don't feel 100% that Tony is voting for Zach, then I don't do what I do there. But Tony was very convincing, like, I'm voting for Zach here. Like, I'm gonna vote for Zach. If he doesn't do that, I don't pull this crazy vote off, because I did not want Kim to go. I want that to be very clear. Like, I was never going to do this chaotic vote if I felt there was any risk of her going. But I felt like she got the right numbers in place. I knew Andrew and Emma were going to vote that way. I knew Tom was going to vote that way. I was like, as long as Tony does what he says, we're good. So I wanted to sit strategically next to Tony for that tribal to make sure that I like knew what he was doing. And so that whole tribal, I'm just thinking like, am I actually going to do this? Am I actually going to do it? Because I wanted to find a moment to like just again cause a little chaos, but also, I saw what Kim did and how easily she was able to pull Emma and Tony and Andrew in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I need her to not trust somebody in that group, right? I need her to not know that she has options, as many options there as she does like with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to create a little bit of chaos. I specifically was targeting Tony, but I was like, if she thinks any of them voted for her, it's helpful for me, right? So yeah, so I sat there, I stewed about it during tribal, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it, and if it bites me in the ass, I had fun, I achieved the things I wanted to achieve, and I'm not going to be boring, my friends will appreciate me. And so I think it served me. It wasn't chaotic just to be chaotic. It served me strategically. I wasn't going to go in there and just throw rogue votes just for the heck of it. But I did want to spice it up a little bit. And it's so hard in these games, all you future players out there, it's so hard in these games to actually make moves that you can claim at final tribal as like your big move, right? Like so many people get to the end by just kind of like sticking with the majority, or like, yes, I was the driver in that one vote for that one player, but it's just there's so few opportunities to do something that you can pinpoint and say, I did this for this reason, here's the strategy, and here's the big impact that it had. It's really hard to do that, especially in such a fast-paced game with so many variables. It's I haven't been able to do it in previous games to like pinpoint and say that's my big move. A lot of live game and online game players, they want to know what's your big move, right? Like what's the big move?
Yeah.
And it's hard to do those and not get voted out immediately after, or not have it feel kind of, a lot of people say my big move was I'm very social. No one cares, right? So so like it was exciting for me to be like, this is something I can claim at the end to be like my big move. And like I knew when I was going up there, I was like, I gotta spell it wrong. If I'm gonna do it, let's do this right. And the only thing I wish I'd done a little differently is like messed up my handwriting a little bit more.
Oh, of course.
But I can't be perfect. So it was just such a wild tribal and experience, and just really, really fun. That truly was like the peak of playing Survivor for me, is that whole round, everything from kind of talking to Kim or talking to Zach, then talking to Kim, throwing the rogue vote, like just all the messiness just felt very Survivor-ish. So it was really, really fun. And you know what, even I think if it screwed me over and ended up, getting me out soon after, I still think I would have done it, because it just, I wanted to play the game.
Yeah.
So I'm happy I did it. I'm proud of that I did that, and was able to still survive and not, and I love that nobody knew it was me. Like it I'm not gonna like pat myself on the back, but like the fact that I got away with it until final tribal is mind blowing to me. Like
Oh, absolutely.
I personally don't feel like I've perfected my social game and my connections with people. But the fact that Kim had no idea and never even thought it was me, I was like, maybe I'm a little better at the social bit than I thought I was, because the fact that she never thought could possibly be me, it's actually kind of cool. Like I was glad I built that amount of trust with her. So that was kind of fun. And then we go to that damn ball and disc challenge. And really the whole thing I was thinking the whole time is like, do I just drop so I can go sit on the sidelines and be a part of the strategic chat that's up on the hill? Like, I think Zach and Andrew were out pretty early. I think it was the two of them. And I was like, that's dangerous. Like those two together are dangerous. So there was a part of, but at the same time, I'm going to go on record right now. I have never, ever in my entire history of LRG playing, I've never won an individual immunity challenge.
Oh,
ever
no
in my
kidding.
life. Ever. It's like the one thing on my bucket list of LRGs is just win a damn challenge, and individual challenge, right? I've I won the beanbag test at tossing thing. You know, I can compete well in team
Yeah.
challenges, but never been able to pull one off on my own. So then that felt like one I could actually do. Like I'm okay with balance. It felt like I was kind of all right. And so I was like, you know what, I don't want to drop. Maybe I should have, but it all worked out okay.
It clearly worked out.
And I can't remember. I have this as a question on my notes. Did we not have any talk at Tribal? Did we go right into a vote? Were there no questions, or is that just the editing?
So there weren't any questions, but I gave everybody an opportunity to, like, if they wanted to say anything. Andrew actually like jumps up at that point and starts whispering in Tony's ear, and then like I think Zach was whispering to Emma a little bit, but otherwise I don't remember there being a ton of chatter. Do you remember anything from that round? Because I know Zach was targeting you, but ultimately everybody goes after Zach.
Yeah, I don't really remember much from that round. That's why I was kind of trying to figure out, was that the edit? Did I remember miss something important? I don't remember much. I do think I assumed I was going to be the target, or Kim was going to be the target again, right? But you know, again, and it's interesting because I did not really have any strategic relationships with Andrew or Emma or Tony. So the fact that Zach couldn't rally the three of them to vote me out was good. And again, I think some of that is probably Kim. I think Kim probably whispered in some ears to go for Zach that round. So, you know, again, I think that's a huge credit to her ability to kind of drive the narrative and the vote for that one as well. So yeah, I mean, I obviously get the vote there from Zach. But you know, I think had we had time, sorry Zach, but had we had time to go back to camp, and like, I think things could have gone differently. So I'm kind of glad it was as rushed as it was. It's probably a bad thing for Zach's game, but great for mine, in that there wasn't a lot of time for Zach to rally and kind of recover from what had just happened previously.
That's right.
Great game design. That's what I say.
As opposed to Zach, who says, how could you skip the final 7 vote? That's such an important one. So we do get to the final 6, and we're back even, 3 Haras, 3 Tortugas. I'd love to hear, you know, going into this round, how secure are you feeling with Tom and Kim at the final 6?
Very secure with Kim. Tom still remains a mystery to me. He will remain a mystery to me until Final Tribal. I'll be honest. Like I never could quite figure him out. And I don't think he was being mysteriously strategic and like having all these these like backhanded deals and stuff. I just couldn't figure out where I fit in his plans. And that's probably what made me the most nervous. And I think at one point I have a note here that Tom tells Andrew, like, I know Justin knows I don't want to go to the final 3 with him.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
You know, like there's some exchange there. And who knows how much of that is Tom bullshitting Andrew versus what he actually wants, right?
Right.
But it was just such a mystery, which will remain that way until we get to the end, right? It's just, I didn't know where I stood with him. I knew still there was this concept of this idol, and I was really concerned about how that was going to play out and if that was going to bite me at some point. But we find ourselves in the worst possible scenario, which is 3-3, right? Like it's 3 versus 3.
Right.
At the very minimum, they can force a tie if they're all working together. Or they somehow pull Tom over, or they use Tom's idol or something. So I think I felt very secure with Kim, which in turn helps me feel more secure with Emma, because Emma and Kim become very close very fast. And that actually becomes very imperative to my game, that Emma trusts Kim more than she trusts anybody else.
Right.
So, you know, again, I think at the final tribal, somebody asks, like, what was your biggest tool or resource? Like, I cannot emphasize enough how much Kim was such a valuable asset in the game, as a friend, as a strategist, as just a social player, to keep the heat off me and to kind of build these relationships that I'm just not as good at doing. So, you know, I still am very wary of Tom in this moment, and we'll talk about kind of the idol thing in a little bit, because that was my counteracting to being so unsure of what was going on with him. But you know, I think, you know, luckily Kim pulls in Emma for that next vote. I think if she doesn't do that, we potentially go to rocks. I don't know. And I've heard about Emma's history with rocks. So like, thank God that's in the mix. But honestly, like if we go 3-3 there and they vote for me and we vote for Andrew, right? Andrew and I become safe.
Right.
And then they all draw rocks. So at the end of the day, I was like, if it does go to rocks, it's actually not that bad for me because I stay safe.
Right.
And if Tom or Kim go, yeah, that kind of sucks. But I'm at least
you're still in.
I'm still in. I'm safe. So, me being the target, I wasn't as worried because I was kind of like, all right, in the rock scenario, like I'm safe. And but at the end of the day, I didn't think that Emma. I don't even know if Tony. I know Tony talks a big game, but would Tony have really gone to rocks? Because I wonder if in that scenario I can say, guys, if you go to rocks right now, I'm safe. Andrew's safe. So it really comes down to you, Emma, or you, Tony, right? Or Kim Tom. But I emphasize
Tony has immunity that
Sorry, Tony has immunity. Oh, you're right.
So Tony can talk a big game all he wants about going to rocks.
True.
Because him and Andrew are now safe because of the tie.
That's right. So I think the play there is to be like, Emma, you don't want to go to rocks, right? Yeah, it's a 33% chance that you're going to go, but it's a 100% chance that you stay if you vote with us and flip, right? So
right.
I don't think that rocks would have ever actually happened, but if it does, I'm safe. So it's not the worst thing in the world. And I love. It's so funny because as I talked about, like Tony and my relationship has all these ebbs and flows. And I truly still at that moment wanted to work with Tony. And the fact that he votes for me there, I actually was like, strategically, I was like, that sucks because I do want to work with Tony. But I was actually almost more like a little bit hurt as a friend. I was like, Tony, I felt like we had a bond. I felt like we were connecting on a personal level. And I was like, that was my first like tinge of like, ooh, like when Zach voted for me, I was like, you know what? It doesn't really hurt from a friend perspective. It hurts more from a strategic perspective. But actually, like Tony and I was like, we're building a little like brother relationship, and like, it actually like I got a little tinge of pain there from him.
And that's when you did
that's when I stab him in the back.
Of tribal.
Yeah. Because to me at that point it was like not like really, right? But he's kind of like dead to me. Like at that point, like I don't have any use for him. I don't have any trust in him anymore. And so, I again, thank God Emma did what she did. She voted with, the way Kim asked her to vote. She keeps me in the game and keeps us out of rocks. And, a big part of that is we now know that Tony's not in the mix with us, right? Like Tony didn't vote with us. I think if Tony votes with us there for Andrew, again, there's potential for different relationships and things to change there. So, doesn't really matter for Tony. He goes on this crazy run and like survives anyway. But that was a big tribal for me to get through. And the fact that Tom does stick with us, with Kim and I in that, I think helps me solidify a little bit more trust in him. Like, all right, if he wanted to flip on us or wanted to do something crazy, that was his opportunity to do it. Right. He didn't do it. And he was talking the loyal game. You see in his confessional, he's like, this is the worst scenario. This is what I was trying to have us avoid, right? Like he was a very, very loyal player, which we, again, see all the way to the end of the game. So I wish I had been that confident in his loyalty actually in the game. Because it was just hard. It was one of those people I just didn't know. I didn't know how much of what he was saying was genuine versus being super strategic. So, yeah. Sorry, I feel like I just rambled for like 10 minutes.
I'm looking at my list of questions and it's like, all right, once he finishes explaining this, I'll ask this. And then it's like, you just start on the next question before I ask it. I'm like, okay, we'll just keep scrolling. The easiest interview I've ever done.
Perfect. Love it.
So anything else before we get to the final five? Because this is a round we have to spend a little bit of time unpacking.
I don't think so. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, again, I'll just say like Kim is such a key piece to my game here, right? And in a few ways, one, really harnessing in Emma and making sure she's going to vote with us. Two, she's really putting herself forward as like a big threat. and I'm able to kind of sit back and let my game be a little bit more subtle, kind of pump the brakes a little bit from my perspective, now that kind of we've had the big Zach and Jonton go and all of that. So I mean, if somehow Kim's not there, I feel like I'm toast, right? So like Kim is really crucial, but this just builds the case of like, if I go to the end with her, I am dead in the water. Like, and that, I think right around 5 is where I start thinking about that. So yeah, that's pretty much it as we head into this.
That's right.
Final 5, what we'll call the uprising of Tony.
That's right. So, and we are going to get into this. I mean, you've already touched on it, and we're going to really dive into this idea of like, do you need Kim to go at some point? But before we get to that, so Tony is public enemy number 1. He, as far as Kim and Tom are concerned, he voted for Kim, and then you literally know that he did vote for you,
right?
And so Emma says to you and Kim, like, oh, if Tony wins, like, I'm out, right? And you guys have this great, like, no, what are you talking about? Like, was it an inevitability? Like, if Tony wins final 5, Emma's out?
I think probably. I don't have as strong of a relationship with Tom as Kim does.
Right.
So I think it really depends on what Kim wants to do there. Like, what does she think is the stronger situation for us? I'm fine going with Tom. I'm fine going with Emma. I think because we are in the majority there, it probably makes sense for the 3 of us to stick together. And we know Tom has the idol, right? If Tom didn't have the idol, maybe there's a bigger case for him to go there.
Sure.
But it's his last opportunity to play it. He's probably going to play it. Why wouldn't he? So I think it probably is going to be Emma, unless Kim and Tom decide to flip it on me, right? And I don't think I felt like that was going to happen in that moment. But I think it is probably Emma, unfortunately. I really didn't want that, but I also, again, I didn't have as close a relationship with Emma as someone like Kim did. So it's a much bigger betrayal from Kim than it is from me, I think, which kind of helps my game a little bit.
Right.
So I think either way, whether we went Tom or we went Emma, Kim's kind of doing more of the backstabbing than I am. So, but yeah, it's definitely an awkward moment. You never know what to do next time, because literally she just saved me, and now I'm like, well, sorry about that.
Right.
So that was kind of tough. And I thought it was really interesting seeing the footage where Tom kind of debates going to the end with Tony. And he very clearly states like he's not there to backstab people, which just is a testament to his loyalty, and which is great. I mean, it's a foreshadowing of what's to come down the road, right? And I will talk about it when we get there, but I think Tom has an opportunity to, I think, carve his own path and make some moves in these next few rounds that potentially could have secured him the win if he is confident in those moves and stands up to them. So I think he has probably the most options at that point, because I feel like almost everybody would have worked with him and trusted him, and he has the idol. So he just has endless options. I feel like I don't remember at any point being like, we need to get rid of Tom.
Right.
At this point anyway. So
Tony wins immunity at the final 5, and you hatch this
another freaking accuracy as well. Let's just talk about it for a second. I'm supposed to be good at tossing things, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is your opportunity to beat Tony," and I couldn't do it. And I've learned nothing with ropes and balls. I'm not good at that.
That's right.
No ladder ball, no ring tossing. That was, again, really embarrassing. And of course, I'm right next to Tony in the lanes too, so I see every time he makes it. I see it, and I actually think I'm distracted watching him, so I'm not as focused on my own thing. So that was unfortunate. He wins, and I'm going to claim this right here, right now. I have a confessional. I hang back and do a confessional with the team as everybody's walking towards the camp, And that is the moment in which I tell the camera, this is my idea for Tom's idol, right? That is the moment where I talk about it before anybody else talks about it. I think it's my idea. So I don't, sorry if anybody else wants to claim it. That I feel like that's the moment that I think about it, and I thought a little bit about it, and I want to be very clear about this. So there's been a lot of debate of like why we did that move and what was the big deal and like why even do it. And for me, it was more about I wanted to have control over how Tom used the idol, right? I wanted to influence how that was going to be used. One, so it doesn't come back and fall on me. And two, because if I do make it to the end with Tom and he has this great big idol move, right? And that's a point for him over me. I didn't have an idol, I didn't find an idol, I never played an idol. So if I can kind of actually influence how it's used, I can turn that around in Final Tribal Council and say, well, actually, it was my idea. And something that's not shown. So I like have my little confessional with about this plan. I then go and talk to Kim about it. I then go and talk to Tom about it because I wanted Kim to know, like, I'm telling Tom this is what I think we should do. I then go talk to Tom about it. Who knows if other things happened, if Kim and Tom talked about it, if other people had this idea, I don't know. I'm going to claim it, my idea, my another thing that I wanted to do, kind of like stir up the game a little bit, cause a little chaos, put on a good show, blah, blah, blah. But it really did have a strategic point to it, which was, again, I don't really know what's going on in Tom's head. Is Tom going to find a way to use it to screw me in some way, right? I'd rather just know how it's going to be used and influence it and try to nudge it in a direction. In my chat with Tom, I even say, Tom, this is what I think we should do. Let's have everybody vote for you. You get a big splashy play. Emma will go, blah, blah, blah. Or if you wanted, you could make another big move, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I said, like, it's an opportunity to take out a big threat. If you think that big threat is me, you could take me out. If you think that big threat is Kim, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you could take Kim out. Now, knowing what I know about Tom now, like, he's a very loyal player. I don't think he would have done that to me or to Kim, honestly. But I was planting the seeds. This is one of my opportunities of like, can I get Kim out without me being the reason, right? So I did try to encourage him to do it in a different way. I was like, hopefully it's not me. If not me, hopefully it's Kim. If it's not Kim, hopefully that's Emma, right? So that's really kind of the spirit behind it. Of course, like, I wanted to be able to claim a fun, flashy move. I loved the jury had such a big reaction. Like, we wanted to make the game fun. So there's an element of that, but it was really more like, how I don't own the idol. I've actually never seen the idol. How can I control its usage without ever actually seeing it or touching it or really knowing that it exists? So, that was kind of the backstory behind that. I'm going to claim it as my move because I do think that I discussed it before anyone else.
Can I interrupt for 1 second to clarify?
Yes,
was your ideal scenario that he vote out Kim so that you don't have to? Is that ideal, or is it still ideal that he goes through with the plan to vote out Emma?
You know what? I think both are good.
Okay.
I think I don't know which is ideal because if I think about it, if Kim goes there, it's then me and Tom versus Tony and Emma. Let's say the next challenge works the way that it does. Tony wins immunity. Do Emma and Tony force rocks at that point? Is it, I don't even know what you would do at Final Four. Is it still the trivia? Is it a fire making challenge? Like, what is it? Right. So, does that then put me in the trivia as opposed to Kim? Like, is it a me and Emma trivia situation? Who knows? So I actually think it works out better for me that Emma goes there. But I think if Kim goes and I can still find a way to get to the end without Kim, that's great, right? Because I know in these next couple rounds, if Kim doesn't go, I'm bringing Kim to the end and I'm probably losing. So, I think it would have been much harder for me to feel good about that move if Kim went, I think, even if it's the right strategic thing. Because if she stands up there and I do claim on the jury and I do claim that move as my own, that means I was the reason Kim got out. And that would have been really, really hard for me. So it's probably better it went down the way that it did, even if strategically it makes the most sense for Kim to go there and for me to have a hand in that. It would have felt like a huge betrayal. So if I kind of served up the idea to Tom and he took it on his own to say like, yeah, I'm actually going to take out Kim here, I'd feel pretty guilty and horrible, but
Right.
it's not the worst thing.
It's not the worst thing.
But it would have been really, really hard because I think I actually do think what we'll talk about, I'm sure shortly, is my loyalty to Kim. I think throughout the rest of the game, I think does show a little, like the fact that I am like I can be respected as a loyal player as well.
Yeah.
Like I did show loyalty to at least one person. I think Andrew mentioned it when we went out to drinks after, or maybe it was Zach, was like, you had to show loyalty to somebody at some point, right? Like you had to show that to the jury. So, and they're right? I think there is an element to say like, Kim and I were together from the beginning. I needed to be loyal to her, at least to one person. And so I can claim that at the end, like I was loyal to the person I claimed to be my ride or die. So, but yeah, the idol move was super fun. I loved watching the jury reaction. I loved the way that it worked out the way that it did. Were there other options or scenarios? I think there potentially were. But I think now knowing what I know about Tom, I don't think he would have ever done anything super crazy with it.
Yeah.
So I think the other alternative was we all vote for Emma. She votes for Tom. Tom plays an idol on one vote. And it's like, womp womp. What a boring moment. So yeah.
Did you have any, so when Tony pulls out his fake idol at Tribal, you mentioned you've never seen Tom's idol. So like Kim and Tom both see Tony's idol and they're like, well, that's not what the idols look like.
Right.
But you don't know that. I almost kept in the full like minute of you in the voting booth doing the math. What was the reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I did not know if it was fake or not. And I think there's a small part of me that like, if it was real, Tom would have, I think, hopefully reacted differently and be like, oh shit, that's what I have in my bag too. We got to do something. Right. Because if it's real, there's no reason that he doesn't play it for Emma in that moment. So last time you can play idols, assuming you're going by standard Survivor rules, he's got to play it for her. Right. So there's no reason he wouldn't in that moment. So I was like, Kim or Tom, whoever has seen these idols would have to know that that's real and would hopefully be scrambling. And the fact that they didn't really react much to it and nobody was whispering, and it wasn't like Tom even just like leaned over to Kim and was like, all right, we got to vote for Justin because that's a real idol. So I felt kind of confident, but I was like, maybe Dylan did some crazy thing where like the idols look different, like they're two absolutely completely different idols. So I do remember having really, really struggling with that, to be like, okay, do I throw a random vote? Does it even matter if I do that? Right? Because if Tom and Kim vote for me and Tony and Emma vote for me, it doesn't really matter, right? Doesn't matter where I vote. If the two of them vote for somebody else, and if I happen to randomly throw the vote on the right person, that's 3-2, but I don't know who they're going to vote for. So there didn't seem to be any scenario where it really mattered if I didn't vote for Emma. So,
sure.
I did think about like, is there any scenario in which I save myself by throwing a vote? Because I would have if I felt like there was an opportunity there. But yeah, I mean, my thought was, I'm just kind of looking at my notes here, right? Like, so in that scenario, Kim and I are voting for Emma.
You're voting for Tom, right?
Sorry, yes. Kim and I are voting for Tom. Let's say Tony and Emma both vote for me. Tony and Emma, yep. And then Tom votes for Emma the way that we planned.
Right.
It then becomes a tie between Tom and I.
Except Tom plays an idol.
So then I go.
Yeah.
But it's 2 votes for me. So it doesn't really matter if I skew my 1 vote.
That's right. That's right.
So
which like, that's what everybody like gave Emma and Tony a hard time for after, like, if you had voted for Justin or Kim, then they go out 2-1-0. And it's like, well, how would they have ever known that Tom had an idol?
Right. So yeah. And again, like, we're idiots in that moment. Like, nobody's thinking clearly. We're all exhausted. It's like mad chaos. And like, you know, if you had the time to think about it logically, you might do something different. But you know, you play with the scenario that you have and the information that you have, and you kind of just got to make a gut decision on what's best for you there. So
Right.
and what's really interesting is like Emma's so mad at Tom in that moment for what he did, and I'm like, hey, come on, Emma, like if he saves himself with an idol, that's a great move, and you should want to vote for that as a jury member. Like, he saved himself, he did what he should have done, don't be mad at him for it. But then B, like, then I say that it was actually my move, and she's like, well, I'm not going to vote for you then in the jury, right? So that was disappointing. You know, I would encourage jury members to, you know, be like, respect the moves that are made and the strategy that's out there. And, you know, obviously bitterness comes into play, and you obviously want to vote for the person that you think deserves to win. But I don't think people are undeserving because they make moves like that. So, you know,
I mean,
each their own. Every jury member should vote the way that they think. I have voted somewhat bitterly as well as a jury member, so I totally get it. But you know, I was hoping that kind of my subtle control of that idol move would be respected by the jury and not seen as a bad thing. So
I mean, it worked for the rest of them. So maybe it lost you, Emma, but it did, you know, we'll get to final tribal soon. Because that does, we are at the finale. We made it all the way to the final four. Justin, once Tony wins that final four immunity, what's your plan at that point? Like, how seriously were you considering voting for Kim? Like, are you like, you know, you end up voting for Tom? Like, is there a pitch to Tony to vote out Tom? Like, what was going on that round for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think my only options were to vote for Kim and do a 3-1, or vote for Tom and do a tie. I don't.
You don't think Tony was open to voting for Tom?
I don't think so. I can't really remember, but I don't think that was ever a scenario that he considered or that we discussed. And like, you know, it's obvious. Like, in that group of four, the biggest threat, the biggest target in that moment is Kim, right? Like, she is the most dominant social player there, right? I think she emerges as a big threat, as the jury's going to love her. Like, I think it makes sense for Tony and Tom in that moment to be like, she's the biggest threat. I was surprised that Tom went that way versus me. I would assume Tom would have been like, let's take out Justin, but you know, small pat on my back. I don't think I was as obvious in a lot of my strategies. So I think Kim is the bigger threat there, which was kind of my plan and my goal, right? Is to make sure that she's always in front of me as a shield. But I was a little surprised that Tom was okay with doing that. There's a part of me that was hoping it would end up being like a 2-1-1, right? So Tom actually votes for me, Tony votes for Kim, and the two of us vote for Tom.
Right.
But there just wasn't enough time for me to try to finagle that. And there was another part of me that was like, is there any way I can get Kim to vote for me? Some sort of like, hey, you know, it's going to be one of us. Why don't we just vote for each other? And then it's kind of up to them, right? We know, like, we've played as long as we can together, blah, blah, blah. And that way it becomes 2 for Kim, one for me, 1 for Tom. Kim goes in a 2-1-1. Again, kind of my hands are not dirty, but
right.
Also not enough time to orchestrate that. And I don't know if I ever could have convinced Kim to vote for me without it feeling fishy. I did, like, I tried to subtly like make her feel like I didn't know what I was doing, in the hopes that maybe she would vote for me. In fact, this is a kind of a fun fact. Every tribal in which we would walk to the voting booth, we'd always make eye contact every time on our walk. And this last one, I did not look at her at all. I put my eyes down, and I was just like, I don't know if that's enough. Maybe that's enough for her to be like, fuck him, he's going to vote for me, I'll vote for him, and put my name down. So, you know, in an ideal world, and this, it's always every fan's dream, right, to get a 2-1-1 or a 3-1-1 or 3-2-1 vote to happen. I don't think I had enough time, or really enough. I don't think I had enough agency in that decision for some reason, outside of deciding if I was going to tie it or not.
Sure.
And kind of going up to the booth, I do think about it multiple, like that vote and the revote. Like, do I just vote for Kim here? Do I Do I betray the one person I've kind of been loyal to? Is that going to show the jury that I'm willing to vote people out if I think they're going to beat me?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I came here to kind of play a little bit of a different game, and maybe that little bit of different game is showing some loyalty, forcing a tie, and seeing what happens. Could I claim that, like, hey, I could have voted for Kim there and I didn't, so the only reason she's in the game still is me? So that was a pitch at the final tribal. One of the few things I maybe have over Kim, of like, Kim wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for me in that vote doing that tie. So, and based on the previous trivia challenge, neither Kim or I did very well comparative to Tom, right? So I was like, there's a good chance Tom might be able to beat her, which again isn't bad for me. Kim goes without me really having a hand in it. I actually try to support her. Tom just seems like a very sharp kid, and so I was like, there's a chance if it is that trivia that he can win, and she goes, and it's not that bad. So in most scenarios, it seemed like the tie was the right thing to do. Show a little bit of loyalty. If she makes it, great. I kind of have the tale of like, I kept her in the game. If she goes, not so bad for me. I think I still get her jury vote, blah, blah, blah. So, I love Tony's quote saying, like, I wish you were dumber, but you're not. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that acknowledgement that I'm not too dumb. But I really struggled. I think even in my voting confession, I was like, do I do it? Like, do I just vote for Kim here? Like, I really struggled with that.
So. Justin, let me ask real quick. If Tony, I think I know the answer. If Tony doesn't win Final Four immunity, any chance he stays?
No.
Yeah.
Nope. No, and it's for a few reasons, right? He obviously betrayed me multiple times at this point. He's building such a great underdog story. I think in a lot of scenarios, Tony wins the game at the end because he had such a harder claw to get to the end. Like, he had to dig, right? And kind of claw his way out of a lot of holes and kind of find any which way to get to the end. And, there are three Tortuga members on the jury. He just needs to get one more. I think I even say that in my plea to Tom towards the end. Right? He just got to get one more person to be excited about that underdog story. I could totally see a Zach or a John Ton voting that way because he's got such a cool story.
Right.
And who knows if the Tortuga 3 would have supported him. I imagine they would have, but who knows if that would happen. But he just has such a good story. And to be the last person remaining in that alliance, to have the challenge wins that he did, to, I think he played very, very well. And so I think it was very clear to us that any opportunity we had to take him out, we had to do it. And so, yeah.
So we do finally get to Tony getting voted out when Tom wins the final immunity challenge. Justin, what are you thinking at this point? Tom wins immunity.
I'm dead in the water. I'm dead. I'm out.
So let me, because I think to all of us on the production team, we're like, okay, so like that's the end of Tony, but you look very surprised that you so like, was that real? Was that a show for the jury? Was that a show for Tony? Like, what was that?
I think I was genuinely shocked because I literally just tried to force Tom into a tie. I was like, I betrayed Tom first. Like, I was the one to backstab him. I just put him through the ringer in a tiebreaker. And yeah, I didn't really have that close of a strategic relationship with Tom. I didn't ever quite feel like we were completely genuine and honest and like tied to each other in any way. So, I was devastated I lost the challenge because there were two, I think Tony had the same thing, right? There were two questions where I was like, I knew the answer, but it felt like a trick. So I'm going to do the other answer that I think it is. And I screwed myself. And so I was just like, I didn't win the an immunity challenge, which I was like, this is when I can win. I know things, and I didn't win. And I just never ever thought that he was going to take me. I didn't know if he felt like, I don't know, I felt like our games were pretty similar. I think from his perspective, he didn't think I made any big flashy moves, but that our games might be kind of too similar that he would want a different story to sit next to him.
Mhm.
I assumed because I somewhat orchestrated the idol thing, like he wanted to take me out of the picture so that I couldn't claim that at the end. I didn't know how much he would be
Sure.
thinking about that, but there never was any moment in my brain where I was like, I think I am now in the final two, which is actually like how I've been successful in the past, is like being brought to the end and then
Oh,
doing
no
well at final
kidding.
tribal. Yeah. So I think in my brain I was just like, that can't happen again. Like he'll never take me. And I think I put on my bag and like I'm like ready to go. Like I just
Mhm.
assumed. And I think in some ways I thought, okay, if Tom puts me on the jury, that's me, Kim, John, Ton, Zach on the jury for Hara.
Right.
Gives him 4 jury votes. I tried to threaten that I'm not going to vote for him, but like, he might be thinking my tribe is there. I can get those 4 votes. I just thought there were too many reasons. And I also knew the game that I played and then knew the moves I was going to claim if I made the final tribal. And,
Mhm.
testament to my game, like he didn't know that as much.
Right.
So maybe he wasn't thinking of those things, but I was just like, I mean, what can Tony claim outside of all these wins? And I knew that Tony had a great story, but I didn't know what Tom was thinking. So
Right.
I was genuinely shocked. I think the biggest point was like I just forced Tom into a tie. So like there's no way he's going to keep me now. Like he's going to be bitter about it. And luckily for me, and testament to his loyalty and his devotion to bringing 2 Haras to the end, like he did that. And we'll talk more about the final tribal, but I was genuinely shocked and super grateful and excited to be there. I just, it was a crazy day. So the fact that I actually got there amongst all the craziness was just wild.
Let me ask you, Justin, and this is always kind of like the BS question to ask people because we don't know what a Tony Tom final tribal council looks like. We don't know the arguments made. But had you been voted out, do you feel like you know who you would have voted for to win?
It's interesting. And we can talk about this a little bit with final tribal too. If Tom has a similar final tribal performance that he did against me, I think I vote for Tony because I feel like Tony would have had a more robust final. I think Tom played so well and didn't necessarily know how to articulate the game, or didn't
Sure.
really know how to be as aggressive as I was in talking about his game. And so if it was a similar situation, I feel like I would have probably voted for Tony, because I do think Tony's a pretty good talker, even at his age. He's very, I think, articulate. I think he has a great underdog story. I think I appreciate that kind of game. And, I my gut says I would have voted for Tony, but we have no idea, right? Because we don't know how Tom's final tribal would have been different and what Tony would have said. Tony could have blown up his own game in that moment, right? So yeah, I think my gut says Tony, but there's this part of me though that does want to be loyal to the person I started with. And but at the end of the day, as a jury member, I'm always going to vote for, in that moment, who I feel like played the best game and articulated their game in the best. And sometimes that really does mean going for the jugular and saying, this is what I did and why I did it. And yeah, I screwed you, but here's why. I've been a juror before and I didn't vote for my former tribe mate in the end. I voted for the other player because I really wanted that former tribe member and ally of mine to be like, yeah, I used you and I screwed you and I voted you out and I'm the reason you're on the jury. And I wanted them to like fully admit that and own it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that Tom would have done that. Like he would have owned that stuff.
Sure.
Where I feel like Tony probably would have owned it a little bit more.
Sure. So we do get to final tribal council. How did you feel about your chances going into into final tribal? Like, was there anything you were anticipating? Like, oh, like this person's probably a lock for me, or like, oh, this one's going to be hard to answer to. Like, what were you anticipating going into it?
I think my only one I was pretty sure about was Kim, and I wasn't sure how she was going to react to my vote reveal. So I was even a little unsure about that. But I was like, I probably can get Kim's vote. I hope she'll be respectful. Or she'll respect that move. That was the only one I felt good about. Honestly, I went in, again, beginning of tribal, before Tom said any words, before I said any words, I was like, this is going to be an uphill battle. They're not going to know my game. If these things I'm about to talk about don't impress them, or they don't care, like in a world of Jontons and Jeans who aren't huge super fans, you never really know how they're going to react to being like, here's how I screwed you all over, right? So and love having them in the game, but it's different from a group of super fans who hopefully are going to vote the way that they vote based on gameplay. But you just don't know. There's a lot more there's just a lot more variability in these players and kind of what they would respect or not respect. So
definitely. And I do think that the speed, like the performance you gave, ends up actually flipping Jean to voting for you, but at the same time, like flips Emma away from voting for you. So there is sort of that like balance of like, what do these non-survivor fans care about? Like, what are they invested in?
Yeah.
So what did you feel was important for you to highlight during that opening speech where you got to pitch your case? And, I think a lot about the confessional Kim gives, I think at the final four, where she says, Justin hasn't had a splashy moment in front of the jury yet. And that's one of those quotes you hear, that's going in the episode.
Yeah, I think for me, I wanted to make sure everyone knew that while it may have been subtle, I really had been playing the game from the beginning, that I know you didn't put my entire speech in. It was quite verbose and lengthy. But from the beginning, I do feel like I truly did influence that first vote on Drew. And so I wanted to make sure everyone knew I've been playing this game from the beginning. It's not like I just woke up at final 8 for the Johnton vote and decided to play the game then, right? I wanted to make sure everyone knew, like, I've been trying to influence the game from the beginning. That I felt like I was a strong asset in challenges, that I was doing things strategically, and that I found my way to the end, right? The whole outwit, outplay, outlast kind of trying to check all those buckets. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted the Drew vote. I wanted to make sure it was very clear that it was me that really got Kim's name off the list and still voted for her, right? Obviously the big vote reveal was like the big moment, but also the idle play and showing that I had a hand in that, even if they didn't believe that it was my move, that I had influence over it, that it was my idea. And then forcing the tie, showing the loyalty, right? Like I wanted to make sure everyone saw that I had a pretty well-rounded game. I did a little bit of everything. While I didn't win any individual challenges, I did have a heavy hand in some of the team challenges. So I just wanted to show that I had a holistic game that I felt like I played pretty well. And as I said 1,000 times, right, I came in with no relationships. I didn't know anybody, and I somehow made it to the end without that. And I know Tom and Tony, they didn't have any relationships either, so it wasn't like that big of a differentiator for me. But I do think that there's something to be said in a game where there are some existing relationships, some that are more obvious than others, that 2 people and even 3 people got to the final 3 without any of those really being a factor. So while it may not differentiate me, it was a big part of my game, because I came into this game being concerned if I was going to be the odd man out or be, screwed. Every single live game I've played, some sort of pre-existing relationship has been a factor in my life, right? Or in my gameplay. So, I think that's always a concern of mine. So it's certainly something I wanted to highlight, that, hey, I didn't know anybody and I still got to the end. So I felt pretty good about my opening and kind of what I had laid out on the table, that I felt like the reaction to me voting for Kim in that very monumental moment was pretty positively received by the jury. Like, no one seemed mad. They were all pretty like shocked and like wowed by it.
They were amused. Yeah.
It felt good. It wasn't like, and even Kim, right? Like, she was kind of smiling and nodding and being like, wow, like it didn't seem like anybody was going to be angry about that. So that was good. So yeah, I felt pretty good, and I felt, sorry, Tom, but I felt even better once Tom did his, because it felt like his energy just went way down, and I don't know how else to describe it. It felt like, he just lost a little bit of the wind in his sails. And it's disappointing, because I think he played such a good game, and he had so many things to talk about, and so many things that I think could have differentiated his game, and he could have kind of stood up and said, guys, I did this and I did that. And I made the decision for Justin to be here because I felt like I could beat him, and like I think there were certain things that he could have said to sway a couple of people. And I don't know if my opening, I think I went first, right? I'm pretty
No,
sure.
he went first.
Did
And
he go
went,
first?
Yeah,
Okay.
he went first for it.
All right. So then that doesn't make any sense. But
no, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that like Tom even told me afterwards, he was like, I didn't know that like the end of the game is like, I didn't know that like that's what we have to do at the end is like make these speeches. So no, I agree with that. I think that like that that was not a competition for like that wasn't his arena to play in.
Right. And I think that it was also, it spoke to his whole game, which was he was fairly on the quiet side, right? He wasn't a big loud voice in a lot of the conversations. I think he was a calm, steady, kind of even voice. He was very like, I think that's partially how he got everyone to trust him, is like he wasn't a big, loud guy like me. So so I think it was really interesting. I felt pretty confident as we go through the different questions from the jurors, and that I had a good chance. I didn't know if it was going to be a blowout, but I do remember there being a moment where I was like, I think I actually could win this, which is bizarre because I wasn't sure that before it started. But I was like, I'm actually feeling pretty good about how I'm answering things and feeling like Tom's not fighting as hard as I think he could be. And should have been. And I hope if he ever does another game that he just, now that he knows that bit, to kind of go in with his list of moves and things, and it's just like a little more confident in his game. So I do think a little bit I benefited from having some of that experience, being in a final tribal before, kind of knowing what to do, and his lack of experience in doing that certainly was a benefit. But I still didn't get all the votes, Dylan. So, like he did something right and I did something wrong. And I think there's definitely, it only 2 votes in the whole game swings his way, right? So I think there certainly was an opportunity for him to take it.
Yeah, no, the impression I got from speaking to the jury before the final 4, the impression I got was that Tom would have been the front runner going to that final tribal. And it came down to like his performance wasn't what he needed to do, and you really just had like a perfect final tribal performance. But Jessica, let me ask, were there any questions that you felt like were a little like harder for you to answer? Was there anybody who you felt like, oh, like I don't love how I answered that question, like I don't have a good, like any reactions like what was presented to you?
I mean, knowing what I know now, right, like the way I approached kind of the idol situation and Emma not respecting that, right, like I probably, hopefully, or maybe should have handled her differently. I feel like I did pretty well, outside of not knowing that Jean was not really a Survivor fan and basically saying like, well, you must be a Survivor fan.
That cracked me up.
And she was like, well, actually, no, I'm not. And I was like, okay,
tell me about
it. Let's pivot that.
You really did have a good pivot, actually, though. Like she came in hot, I thought, and you handled it well.
Yeah, I mean, I tried, and I was glad to hear her and see her basically say like, Tom, why aren't you fighting more for my vote, right? I thought that was really like a good question to ask him in that moment, because it did feel like he'd almost given up a little bit. And so I was glad that the jury saw that and was trying to push him to give more, right? So I feel like for most of it, I felt pretty good. I'm trying to remember kind of who asked what. But, obviously a hard one was Kim's. She basically, asked me why I didn't show as much loyalty to her as she did to me. And, I felt like I answered that okay, because I truly didn't feel like I ever put her in any danger. And in fact, I did fight for her in the final 4. So
that's right.
I felt like I answered that one okay, but it was still hard to hear her feel like a little bit betrayed. But yeah, no, it felt pretty good. And I think by the end of it, I think I put my hand up when Tony did his question around, I think I put my hand up for 4 or 5 people.
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah. So I felt pretty good about, by the end of it, by a few folks, that I was like, I think I actually could win this. I was a little surprised. I think I did put my hand up for Andrew's vote. I was a little surprised I didn't get his. And we talked a little bit after the game. He's like, yeah, we just didn't connect as much. And he felt, I think, like I dismissed him a little bit. And so that's certainly something that I want to take as good feedback. And it is something, I think I've mentioned it, right? I'm not as good with some of the social relationships, especially if I don't necessarily see a longer term game opportunity with them.
That's
right?
really hard to do in these games.
It's
If you don't
hard.
legitimately see a path forward with person, it's really hard to just like lie to, like to make
fake
it
a
up.
friendship.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me. I've done it in other games, and it's been really hard. And I remember in another life, in another game that I played, I talked to a jury member, and they were like, what happened? And I was like, you know what? I just didn't want to lie to you anymore. I kept lying to you, and I actually do care about you as a person. I just don't want to lie to you anymore. So at some point I just stopped talking to you about strategy because I couldn't lie anymore. And that's kind of what kind of happens in these games, is if it's really hard to just continuously lie to people. And as much as you're not always going to tell the truth, and there is a element of manipulation and betrayal and strategy here, like it's very draining to try and build social relationships with people that you just don't see a longer term game with.
Right.
So I see a little bit differently than Andrew. I thought that second morning I came in being like, I want to work with Andrew. I thought we had a chat. I may be completely misremembering it, but I felt like I did kind of extend an olive branch and didn't feel much back. And I certainly, if he's watching this, I certainly did not mean to disrespect him in any way, or really I did not mean to shrug him off or not engage with him. It wasn't a conscious decision. I think for me, I made a lot of assumptions that if Andrew was going to work with us, it was going to be through Kim as a channel, and I didn't have to put a ton of effort into that kind of path.
Sure.
And that's a good lesson for me. And as if and when I play more games, right, it's a good thing for me to think about, is how to do better with some jury management of the folks that I don't have a close relationship with and don't see a longer term strategy relationship with. So yeah, it was interesting. I was a little surprised about both Andrew and Emma, not because I think I deserved a 7-0 win, but more kind of the reasoning.
Sure.
So, and I was actually a little surprised that I did get Zach and Jonton, mostly because, again, I didn't know how they would receive what had happened and my part in their demise. And if they would have, I think Tom and I had equal hands in that, but maybe because I claimed a little bit of a bigger part of that they would feel bitter about it. Luckily, they both, respected the game moves and how the game played out. So that was nice. But I think, and I really had no idea what Tony was going to do. Again, I think he's a big game player and respects the game. So once I kind of saw my tribal versus Tom's, I felt like maybe he'd lean my way just because I was owning the game a little bit more.
Sure.
But yeah, it was interesting. I wasn't really sure I was going to go. I thought I had a chance. So it was fun. It was obviously really fun to actually end up there with Tom, someone I was on the same tribe with from the beginning. I wouldn't say like with from the beginning, because we weren't really, I think, that tightly aligned, but at least it was 2 Hara members at the end. The tortoise did not beat the hare in this race.
That's right.
But I will say, I kind of did take the tortoise and the hare kind of analogy to heart a lot. Like I did try to go a little slower and steadier in the beginning, and then turn on the jets towards the end. So utilize a little bit of my tortoise. Oh, this is such a good moment for this interview. Utilize both, right? Like be both the tortoise and the hare. Utilize the tortoise moments when you need to go slow and steady and like not rock the boat. And then sometimes you just got to turn on the jets and speed the game up and make big moves and do some crazy things. And I felt like I tried to lean into both of those personalities in the game to be as well-rounded of a player as possible. I don't think you can get through the game just going slow and steady.
Mhm.
That may have been Tom's demise while he was on the Hara tribe. I feel like his game was very slow and steady and very even. Um, but I also don't think you can be a hare and like go crazy, which maybe was Zach a little bit, right? Like Zach was playing very hard and fast from the beginning. And I think maybe sped up and tried to run the race a little too fast too soon. So
And then he literally tripped.
exactly.
Exactly.
So, I think it was really interesting how it all played out. I think, again, any one little thing here or there changes, whether we win immunities early or we lose some of the later ones and the majority flips, or I decide to vote with Kim or against Kim earlier, or I don't vote for Kim in the tie, or I don't vote with Kim in the tie. Like any one thing could have completely changed this game, which is why the game is so fun and amazing. And it's the hardest and most complex game in the world, because it really, like, any one move or any one decision can completely change the course of it. So
Absolutely.
and those are moves that you make or moves other people make, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. And I, as I said before, I've played some very intricate 8 days in the woods, stepping over snakes, battling mosquitoes, starving to death games. And I've played this game, which was a very strategy focused, challenge focused kind of weekend in the park, right? So it was much more simple, but in some ways harder, because it's much more fast paced, and it's all strategy. So that's all you really need to think about. And so it's a very condensed and intense version.
Mhm.
So I think there's cool parts to all of it, or to any style of game. And this is where I plug. You can cut this out if you want.
No, I was gonna save
But
it to the end if you want, but let's go ahead and plug this now. What do you got
yeah, no,
coming
I
up,
was good.
Justin?
I mean, I am being very genuinely honest here, Dylan, that playing in Millennium Park and some of the other games that I've played has really inspired me to want to bring more of these games to Massachusetts and to New England area. So I have started my own live reality game. It's called Outlast. It's happening at the end of July. And we had about 50 applicants apply for our first season, which was awesome. And players from all over, even outside of New England, which is great. So we'll have a pretty good diverse cast from all over the place, and hope to make it a recurring annual thing, which I know Millennium Park will also be annual every year. And it will be different in some ways. This will be more of a survival based in the woods for the weekend. You actually have to camp, you don't get to go home, like that kind of stuff. So it is a little bit different. But yeah, so I just, it's such an amazing community that these live games are a part of, with people that are super adventurous and just it's the old Survivor dream of bringing together a bunch of people from different walks of life and throwing them in a scenario that's different
Absolutely.
and difficult, and seeing what happens, right? So I'm really excited. I'm certainly going to steal many of your ideas, so be on the lookout for
I
that.
hope you steal some of our players. I'm hoping we see at least one make it on the cast.
Yeah, you may see a Millennium Park player in
And I
the
hope it's
cast.
John Ton.
You never know. You never know.
I'll put the link to that in the bio. I know the applications are closed for this year, but
Yeah.
if anybody's interested, and I assume you're still looking for people to potentially be part of production, maybe, or people who are just like open to who want to keep in the touch for applications for next year. I've played in Justin's online games. If this live game is anything like his online games, you guys are going to want to check this out. This is going to be fun.
And maybe someday I can convince Dylan to come play. You never know, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I'll be your first boot again, but this time in person.
Yeah, I want to snuff the torch.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for people to follow it. We will be doing episodes. Again, very much inspired by Dylan. I think Dylan, for your smaller crew, small but mighty crew, and the game that you put on, the episodes that you put out were incredible. I have friends from other live game world, the live game world, that have watched the episode and just so impressed with what you've put together on such a small budget and scale, but just so well done at the same time. It's just way more than I think anybody expected. So we hope to even have half the success with our episodes that you have had. In fact, I'm going to try to recruit you for the editing team. Spoiler alert.
I'm free. I'm available unless Millennium Part 2 happens. I'm free, you know.
Oh, you could do both at the same time, Dylan. So it was very inspiring for me, and gave me the extra nudge I needed to get this game off the ground. So
Awesome.
we're happening in July. I hope people will follow our page, watch our episodes, apply for next year. I think we may have some spots for volunteers. So if people are interested in volunteering and helping out, certainly you can reach out to me. We're keeping it fairly small, again, inspired by Dylan, just to streamline and not have too many cooks in the kitchen, and just kind of like for this first season, keep it somewhat simplified. But yeah, always looking to grow the family. So that's Outlast, the LRG.
You guys can click the link in the bio to check that out. Justin, so that does bring us to the end of all of the questions I had. Any final reflections on the weekend in Millennium Park? Anything else from the notes? Anything else from other people's interviews that you wanted to set the record straight on?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't think anything else controversial that was said. I think I've covered off on all my notes. No, I mean, I just kind of said it, but I'll say it again. It was a really wonderful experience. Again, not knowing what I was getting myself into. I think Kim jokes about like kind of having a signal with Andrew if it was like a disaster and they wanted to get out, right? Like I didn't have a signal. I didn't have anyone to motion to. I didn't have anyone to help me get out of it. But you know, I walked in being like, you know what, if it's terrible and I'm voted out early, it's fine. It's one day.
Right.
Who cares? But I mean, I get there and I just go completely into game mode, right? It's hard for me. I'm a very competitive person not to want to try and not to make the most of it. And, you know, I think everybody in the game, at least on our tribe, especially, like took it pretty seriously. And, you know, I think it takes everybody to be in the mode of like, this is a game, we care about it. You know, it's always the worst when somebody wants to quit or someone's just not taking it seriously. So the fact that everybody was there to play and like to have a good time and create a good experience and, you know, live in that world of the game when we were there was just really great. And your team was great. You know, had so much fun with them doing the confessionals and watching their reactions and you know, seeing you do your host thing and sweat through that shirt. It was just so much fun. It was really, really fun. And I hope, you know, when season 2 happens, not if, but when it happens, that more people will give it a shot, because it is a great taste of live games. And if you're those that don't love camping and don't, you know, this is a great opportunity to get a chance to play the game. You'll still get a little dirty, you'll get a little sweaty, but you can go home, brush your teeth, unless you're going to change the format, Dylan. But but you know, I think for anybody that's wanting a taste of what a live game is like, this is a perfect opportunity, because you get so much out of the experience without any of the camping. So it was really, really wonderful. Can't say enough. And not just because I won, not just because I like, you know, I would say it either way. And you know, it gave me the opportunity to meet some really amazing people and still keep in touch with many of them. You know, Kim and I don't live that far away from each other, so we still stay in touch and meet up every now and then.
I love that.
And, yeah, so it's really wonderful. You know, I hope it continues to live on and on. As much as I joke, you know, it's a lot of work, and I know that now, especially trying to do my own. It's a lot to figure out and coordinate, and so it's another job, really. It's a big responsibility and commitment, and you definitely provide an experience that is worthwhile for everybody. And so big shout out to you and your wife and your friends that were on your crew, and Emma's dog, and you know, just everybody involved.
I appreciate it, Justin. Hey, Justin, thank you so much for not just the last 2 hours of the year, but all the kind words about Millennium Park. I really appreciate it.
2 hours and 20 minutes.
I know, for anybody who's still listening, we'll keep you posted on any news for the future, but otherwise go check out Justin's game in the description below. And yeah, Justin, this is great. Thank you so much. It's great to hear all your insight on everything.
Thank you, Dylan. You're the best.
All right, we'll talk soon. Bye, Justin.